there, aquatic adventurers. Welcome back to Musicland Stories, the origin point for all music and adventure stories in the known universe, and some of the unknown ones. And we're here at the Musicland Concert Hall. I'm your trusted narrator, the captain, and my crew and I are homeward bound after a long, fruitless journey. You see, we set out to find the last Leviathan, a fabulous fabled sea monster whose song has become the stuff of legends. We were hoping to capture a recording of its tubular tune, but we found so many other incredible creatures along the way that, well, we got sort of sidetracked. That tends to happen when you're out there in the ocean. The waves just sort of carry you where you need to go. At least, that's what I had to tell myself to fight off the fear that we, may have gotten lost. I was in the cockpit with Omar. He's the youngest of our crew and quite a talented trumpeter, though lately he's been tooting a conch shell instead. He was mostly just there to keep me company, so I don't blame him at all for our, directional confusion. That was all on me. Also, Omar was a sensitive soul, took things very personally, especially when things went wrong while he was trying to help. You may know someone like that yourself. None of this was his fault, though what happened next was definitely mine. I told Omar that I had to go check some readings in the engine room. That much was true. Our submarine was fueled by the songs we discovered in the ocean, and, well, we'd been running pretty low on new tunes after all that time beneath the waves. I set the ship to autopilot, then said, "Omar, you're in charge." And that was my first mistake. Not because Omar did anything wrong. It's just that he took his responsibilities very seriously. Even when his responsibility was mainly just to sit there for 5 minutes and fiddle with his conch shell. Because, you see, something happened while I was down in the engine room. There was a ping on the sonar system. It's very dark when you're deep underwater, so we rely on sound to get around. But this little melody made Omar's ears perk up. It sounded to him like the song of the last Leviathan. But that was impossible, right? We'd given up on searching for it. Omar got excited. So much so that he stopped paying attention to what was going on in the water out the window. Which should have been fine. The ship was on autopilot. But I had told Omar he was in charge. So when he saw the blue whale's baleen, that's the sort of broom-like teeth thing used by whales to filter out their food, he saw the blue whale's baleen sloshing over the windshield just like those soapy curtains at a car wash. And so we found ourselves in the belly of a whale. And Omar thought it was all his fault. The rest of the crew had been sleeping when it happened. But they all woke up when they felt the ship suddenly speeding up as it tumbled down the blue whale's esophagus. That's the tube that connects your throat to your tummy. It felt like we were falling forever. I can't even remember how many times I lost my footing down in the engine room as the ship flipped end over end over end. Though that's probably because I bonked my head a few times along the way. But then the whale belly roller coaster came to a halt, almost as abruptly as it began. Our ship clanked a few more times until it finally came to a stop, somewhere in the belly of the beast. from inside the ship, we could still hear the cavernous echo of her stomach. And look, obviously, none of us wanted to be eaten by a whale. But judging by the empty sound inside her gut, she was pretty hungry right about then. But the kids on my crew weren't concerned about that. They were too busy, well, falling into a panic.
We're gonna be stuck forever,
I heard Ezra shouting.
I don't want to turn into whale poop,
Kaylee cried. Margie did her best to calm the others down, but, well, that was sort of difficult when she herself was terrified of turning into a tragic folktale before the age of 12. In fact, they were all so overwhelmed that none of them noticed Omar slipping off the ship. Like I said, he blamed himself, all because I said he was in charge. He didn't even bother with a scuba suit. The shallow water in the belly of the whale barely came up to his shins. Remember, whales aren't really fish, they're mammals, just like you, which means that they breathe air like you as well. Omar sloshed through the dirty stomach waters, hanging his head low with shame. He carried the conch shell trumpet in his hand as he strayed further and further from the ship. He soon realized that the sound he'd heard in the cockpit, the one he could have sworn was the last Leviathan, was actually coming from inside the conch shell. Have you ever put a seashell up to your ear and listened to the sounds of the ocean stuck inside of it? It was sort of like that, but it was getting louder. So Omar put the conch shell up to his ear, and he listened. And he was so shocked to hear that magnificent melody that he didn't notice the cranky old salmon that was swimming right where he was walking, to the point that he almost kicked it by accident.
Hey! The sleek silverfish popped its head out from the shallow waters of the whale belly.
Do you mind? I'm swimming here.
Omar stopped in his tracks.
Did you just talk?
He said. He'd seen a lot of magical things on this journey, but most of them were so clearly big and magical. Not like a normal salmon, who was cranky and old and possibly from Brooklyn. Just casually talking to him in a whale belly cave. The salmon let out a hearty laugh.
Well, yeah,
he said.
I'm the salmon of knowledge. Maybe you heard of me.
Omar did not, in fact, know anything about a talking salmon full of knowledge. So he shook his head.
People like to try to eat me, said the salmon. Like I'll share all my smarts if you trample on my skin. It is tasty, to be fair. But I don't think that's what this whale was thinking when she swallowed me. However many years ago it was.
The salmon looked at Omar again, squinting.
You're new here, ain't you?
Omar nodded. He tried to explain what happened, how it was all his fault that they had ended up here. But the fish wouldn't let him finish.
No one ends up in the belly of a whale unless they got a good story, said the salmon.
So Omar started to explain. But the salmon didn't seem very interested in his sob story. That is, until Omar mentioned the last Leviathan.
The last Leviathan? That's what you've been looking for?
The salmon said.
Well, why didn't you say something?
Omar tried pointing out that, well, he was saying something. Like that's literally what he was doing when the fish interrupted him. But the salmon of knowledge just shook its head.
The last Leviathan is closer than you think, kid. Though I can tell you ain't aware of your personal space much, since you almost walked right into me.
Omar tried to argue. Then he heard the song again. The lonely lament of the last Leviathan. though it was drenched in more echo than the version he was used to. He glanced back down at the conch shell and wondered briefly, was that where the sound was coming from? He brought the shell up to his ear and listened closely once again. He heard the song again, all right, but it wasn't any louder or clearer than it was when he was just holding the shell down by his side. If it wasn't coming from inside the shell, then... Omar looked down at the shallow waters he was standing in. There were other fish there too, aside from the cranky salmon of knowledge that was still just staring him down. 3 shimmering golden fish swam all around his legs, and as they moved beneath the water, he noticed the melodies moving along with them. Imagine a song played in stereo. That's when you hear something different on the left and the right. This was sort of like that, except the sad, lonely song of the last Leviathan was coming from 3 different directions instead of just 2. And those 3 directions were constantly moving, swirling around him, seemingly in sync with the fish that were floating there. Omar looked down at the trio of fish surrounding him. Then he glanced over at the salmon of knowledge. Then he looked down again. No wonder we had failed to find the last Leviathan. There had been more than one of them all along. Omar rushed back to the submarine. He crashed right through the door, stumbling over clanking hardware and instrument accessories as he shouted to the ensemble crew, "It's here! It's here! I found the last Leviathan!" He collided first with Kaylee in the hallway. She asked if he was feeling all right, even though she was the one who'd been knocked down on the floor. Soon Margie and Mingus joined the calamity, followed by Ezra, slinking in behind them with their drowsy, "Hey, what's going on?" Omar was rambling with such excitement that it was hard for others to follow. "You saw how many last Leviathans? Huh? Shouldn't there be only one?" "It's right there in the name, the last Leviathan. And what would it be doing in a whale's gut anyway?" Omar had to stop to catch his breath. He hunched over, hands on his knees, and pointed back out the airlock the heat just entered through. "There," he said. "Listen!" And they heard it. All of them heard the song of the last Leviathan, coming through in 3-way stereo. Omar held up the conch shell. "It's in here too," he said. "Or at least, we caught an echo on the outside where the other 4 were waiting." That's when it all began to click for me. 3 and 4 make 7, a magical number in many different cultures. And Omar, well, he was 7 years old. So of course he'd be the one to put it all together. The salmon just gave him the nudge he needed to find the truth inside of him. As it turned out, the last Leviathan was indeed the last of its kind. But it also had the powers to split into 7 smaller fish. That's how the fabled beast could protect itself from predators. Think of it like a mythological defense mechanism. But then, somewhere along the way, 3 of its 7 cells were lost, swallowed by the whale that we were stuck inside of. So the other 4 mini Leviathans spread out. They searched the world over, hoping to find the other pieces. That's why the last Leviathan was singing out its song, and why it always sounded so alone. It was trying to find itself. Literally, it was trying to reunite with the parts of itself that had disappeared however many years ago. I stepped out into the wading pool that was the whale's belly and scooped my hands into the water, picking up one of the magical golden fishes. A piece of the last Leviathan. We can help, I said. And it seemed to understand. Sure, we were still stuck inside of a whale, but we'd figure that part out. Somehow. I sent Margie and Mingus down to the hold to find a fish tank that could hold our new friends. And we welcomed the 3 mini leviathanettes onto our ship. And just in time, too. The whale must have noticed, because the ground of the cavern, the stomach, started to shake. Like an earthquake, or more like a rumbling tummy.
What's going on?
Omar asked. But he knew the answer. He had the knowledge now. And, well, I didn't have time to explain it myself before the blue whale blew out a hearty, hefty sneeze. And shot us out of its blowhole like a super soaker. But that's a roller coaster for another time. For now, this is your captain. Out. Musicland Stories is a collaboration between Starglow Media and Double Elvis. Executive producers from Double Elvis are Jake Brennan and Brady Sattler. Executive producers from Starglow Media are Jed Baker and Agarenish A. Palmer. This episode of Musicland Stories was written by Tom Dunn. Alessandro Santoro is our showrunner. Narration by me, Nikki Lynette. Original score by Scott Janovitz. Story editing by Zeph Lundy. And episode mix by Colin Fleming. Grown-ups, you can find more ad-free audio fun for the whole family by subscribing to Starglow Plus on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts.